So the song Eclipse is from my band King's Revenge. And as far as it being written, it was all written by all of us in general together, but it first started happening with the first riff, which is the money riff, and then again evolved the parts. So as far as learning the whole thing, I usually play all the guitar parts first, and then from there I try to follow the drums or anything else I can that's not identical to the guitar originally played. So of course I wanted to play the intro, so I just played basically exactly the guitar line, a little bit here and there. I wanted to pop in and out. The jazz bass was my number one at the time. I really didn't have anything else I'd like to play, so that's when I first got this. So all I wanted to do was play this. So ultimately, this is the one that I chose. Yeah, I use the Alpha Omega because that's the amp that I have and the amp that I know more of. Besides just the bass, and I used to have the pedal too. That's how it started. It came with the pedal, and then I got the amp, so it has more headroom, definitely a lot heavier, and also has a compressor, so which is what I needed. To be really, what's the word I'm looking for, groovy, because it just drops off, and there's big guitar chords, and then of course the vocals have to be the big, right in the face. So I just tried to be right between the drums and the guitar, not too much out, pop in and out when I can, and then of course when the chorus comes in, that's when it all just appears. So, and then I was trying to play in the chorus, when the chorus comes, trying to come in and out as far as hitting the chords with the guitars, but also playing a little bit of walking notes here and there to come in and out. Then there's the breakdown. The breakdown, I played identical to what the guitar would be, just because it sounded right to me. It always does. So, and then out of that would be the outro, and the outro I just really wanted to just lay down real heavy tones, octaves. And then of course at the very end, right before the very outro, I did like a David Ellefson type of thing where I just right up the neck, which note for note. So I think that might be the end.
So the bass that I chose is pretty much the same instrument I choose for everything. A J bass, 4-string. I tuned it down a half step, which was fitting for this song. And I always go for the J bass because like 9 out of 10 times it's the right one. Put both, I mean, like just set it to 100% volume, tone, everything just up. And the bass kind of naturally scoops out frequencies that you're going to do anyways. I adjusted my right hand technique to get a little bit more smack out of the notes. And I'll show you how I did that in post also. And yeah, good old J bass, hard to go wrong. The strings that I went with was probably the wrong choice. I used these pressure wound GHS strings. When I filmed this, I was actually live streaming on my Twitch channel at the same time. By the way, go to twitch.tv/Jayme Lewis, the bassist, and you can watch next time I do it. Anyways, I had just gone live and I was like, I'm going to track this song. I got to put some new strings on. So I go in the closet, I pull out a set of strings and I start putting them on. And after I got like 2 of them installed, I noticed that these were not my normal GHS bass boomers. These were pressure wound, which I guess it's kind of like a half wound string where like if you run your fingernail across it, it'll still go, but not as much as a round wound string. So it's like kind of flat, kind of not. So it just had a duller sound, more fundamental, but it was missing the zing or that top end smack that you would probably get from a stainless steel round wound string. So I was kind of fighting that, but I just figured, hey, fuck it, let's go with it. Why not? So I played the song that way and just kind of dug in a little bit harder. And the plugin processing was pretty straightforward. I went into, first of all, this Ampeg SVT. These aren't the exact settings that I used. I just know that this is the plugin I used to kind of get the general tone. What some of the things I like to do, I probably went like this. I probably started with the rock A or B preset. And first thing I'll do is I'll drive the volume a little bit harder, hit the input gain, and then power soak, back it off. So basically, it'll drive the amp, it'll drive the tubes harder, but obviously this isn't, these are virtual, you know. And then from there, I also went into this 1176. Again, this is my go-to compressor for bass, rock, or anything. It's my favorite. It's a really fast reacting compressor. So that's probably all I did there. And I'll say this also, before hitting the SVT, I for sure used this Source Audio Aftershock distortion. So we were getting kind of 2 different levels of overdrive. One from the pedal, which was very minor, and then again here in the Ampeg, I drived it a little bit more to get even more grind out of it. So if we come over here to the actual session, I'll solo up the bass and I'll turn off all the plugins. So this right here is what was recorded. This is the tone. So again, there is 2 stages of overdrive, a little bit from the pedal, and then a little bit more from the Ampeg, and then just kind of compressing it off to get a nice and level and even bass tone. And again, I was using strings that were duller than I had probably wanted. And I also should have used a pick, but I'm not a very good pick player. So I had to kind of smack with my fingers a little bit more to really pop in a rock mix and a dense, heavy rock mix like this. So I used this cool plugin called the Neutron Transient Shaper. Isotope has this cool transient plugin that basically, I'll show you what it does. We'll enable it. Actually, no. Here's what it sounds like with no transient shaping. And then here's with it engaged. It's out. So it just kind of sounds dull, like it's missing that smack. And now you can really hear the strings are, they have that pop. They're cutting through like a slicey sound. And then the last thing that I did is I just hit a little bit of EQ to roll off the low end and the high top end to kind of make room for the track. And then I just dipped a few frequencies, apparently, where are we? 271 and 638. Those are pretty common frequencies to pull out on a bass guitar. And then I did a little boost at like 2.6, again, to really get that finger smack. And as far as compositionally, I don't know, rock songs I think are some of the easiest to do. It's great music to start with because it's orchestrated. You know, kind of like classical music. When I look at the page, if I'm playing Mozart, I don't have to go, what should I do? Like, no, you just play the part. You just play the written part. No questions. Rock music isn't that orchestrated, but it's pretty straightforward. Is there a riff? Play the riff. And if you want to do something special, harmonize with the riff. But like, you pretty much got two options. So I think in the intro, I was just doing what a bass player should do, just playing the riff. Going into that verse, I just decided to add a little, what is that, a Spanish Phrygian scale? Yeah, just a little bit of movement at that part because the guitars go to this wow, wow, wow. They're kind of letting their notes hold out. The drums didn't do a big fill there. So someone gets a moment to shine. I took it, so that's what I did. The verse 1 groove is just pretty much, again, like sort of what you would expect a normal bass player to do. Sit behind the pocket because that's kind of like has a loosey-goosey feel. And yeah, just did a simple pentatonic-y lick or bass groove, and then just made sure whenever those kick drums added in that quarter note triplet, the boom, 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 ga, I just, tried to make sure I lined up with those as well. And that right there, what that riff comes in all the choruses, da 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 ba. And I just figured I would introduce it early. I don't know if it had been played in the intro or by some of the other guitars. I don't think so. So rather than the chorus being the first time you hear the da 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 da, I brought it in early on the verse because why not? Going into that first chorus, that's kind of one of my go-to tricks. When someone else does a fill or someone else does a lick, one of my favorite things to do as a bass player is literally pull the rug out from under them. Either transitioning from a chorus to a verse or a verse to a chorus. I don't know. Transitions, that's usually where everyone's gunning for. It's the turnaround. So everyone's trying to throw something in at that point. And I think one of the coolest things to do is just to do nothing. And when the low end disappears completely, boom, when we all come in at that next section, it kind of hits you a little bit harder. That was kind of a little interesting thing. Going into verse 2, pretty much that whole chorus, I'm just locking with the rhythm guitar. I've done enough of this kind of rock work to know that's what they want. The bass guitar is just the rhythm guitar, but lower. Just do the same exact thing, and every once in a while, just take a moment to shine or do something a little bit different. So going into the verse, at the end of the chorus, when it repeats, we've got that turnaround. The guitar does this. So going into the verse, I decided to play that an octave higher so that it would set me up to be in the higher register for the second verse. And that's a cool technique when you're tracking, recording, or playing live. If you're looking for ideas, sometimes something you've done already, just do it in a different register. And then that sets you up. If you do it smart at the end of a section, now you can begin that next section in your higher register, which is, again, it helps move the song forward without you actually having done anything different at all. Again, that was the same riff, same melody, but it kind of sets you up for something else. I have no idea what that was. What the hell was that? That's some bullshit. That's kind of one of my tricks. Verse 1 and verse 2, they need to be different. So if I do one kind of mellow, the next one's got to ramp up a little bit. And so I figured a transitional fill would do the job in this case, but I don't know. Probably too flashy. But it was at a time where the singer wasn't singing and the guitar players weren't doing anything cool and the drums didn't do a fill. So, I mean, it is appropriate, but it's probably a bit too flashy for this song. The next chorus, I pretty much do exactly the same way. Tonight. Anytime you get a lot of silence like this, you have a choice. Do nothing or come in with something. So I just kind of harmonized with what the guitars were doing here. Again, rock music, it's arranged. Just play the part. That's what it needs. Okay, you might not notice it, but this part right here is actually kind of interesting because I changed the riff. Sort of. I'm harmonizing with it. If you listen, the first time we do it, it's and when the guitars change, they start to harmonize with each other. But check it out. It's actually different in the bass. Right here. Oh, and the drums go to biddy-biddy-gana. So at this point, I'm trying to harmonize with what the guitars are doing. It's the same riff, but the last two notes of each phrase, I just change it. I think I go to the fifth or the root. If they're on the fifth, I go the root. If they're on the root, I go the fifth. I don't know. It's an Iron Maiden trick. Why not? And then obviously the drums changed their pattern. They brought in some double kicks, so I tried to do the same thing. And the outro, I decided instead of playing the exact same riff as the guitars, I would just go back and reprise that intro riff because the intro riff never comes back. That's a cool riff, but we only ever hear it at the beginning of the song. It never comes back. So I just played that same exact thing through the outro, which is it's almost the same as what the guitars are doing. It's like 80% the same, and then it sounds like they're going off and adding something cool to it while I hold down the fort. I don't know. There's something I missed there. Again, I did this live, so I didn't have the ability to punch in, but I wish that I had caught the gallop that the drums do right here. You'll notice at that part, I didn't jump onto the gallop. It's what I should have done. And then the same thing, just harmonizing with those quarter note triplet, or some sort of triplet. But also the space in there is bum 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 instead of da 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 da. The staccato was really important because if you listen to the track, the guitars are playing stabby, yum bum 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 bum, and even though the drums are going to town, he's playing on his toms. So you get, and those just don't have a lot of sustain to them. So I just want to make sure that I matched that the guitars and the drums are doing as well.
right. So, so this song, unlike the other song, and thank you for involving me in this series. I really appreciate it because this is fascinating to me to hear other bass players' takes on things. And to that note, this song, I wanted to bring in some different genres because I felt like, well, first of all, it has a lot of these open chords that I thought the first song was kind of going to have, but didn't quite have. So there's a lot of these open chordal things that the guitar's doing. So there's a lot of room for bass. So I thought, well, I really want to do something creative, and so a lot of creative stuff that I pull from is. And then I really think that your watchers, your subscribers should start checking out is some post-punk bass players like Steve Severin from Susie and the Banshees. Because on Tinderbox, the song This Unrest, like that bass line is so creative. And it's almost like those bass players they didn't care what the bass line, what the rules were. So they just came in and they're like, what can I do that sounds interesting, right? So they made up these really melodic bass lines, and they would use like phasers, and mostly they would use chorus is really what they would use. And so I wanted to kind of, I like asked myself, what would Peter Hook do? He's the bass player from Joy Division. So I was like, what would Peter Hook do right here? So this is where I got like one of the main riffs, for like the main riff of the song, the intro riff, but I just wanted to come in hard. So I came in hard with like, I did not pull any stops. I was like, we're going chorus, we're going phaser, we're going my regular tone, and just lay it all on top of each other. So it just has this big like, so that's the first part. That's the first 4 bars. So actually, I learned this from Josh on the last video, right? Because I can't remember what key it was in, but he didn't really need to use, it was D. And he didn't really need to use a BEAD bass, but when he did, it pulled in all this low end. And this is why I'm fascinated by this series, because I'm learning from other bass players what they might do instead of being stuck in my ways and like, oh, this is how I do it. So I was like, well, Josh did that, let me try that. Plus, I don't want to tune down my bass. I'm semi-lazy, and I don't want to remember like, oh, it's a half step lower now. All the patterns are changed, and so also, because it's an E flat, but you can still do that. The pentatonic walk up, like the D flat to E flat, and so you can. It's like I needed that note too for part of it, because when the vixen comes in, right, and he has to, what is it that she said? He says like he has to abide, right? So this part, I followed the vocal line, but this is where like in that part where I wanted to add some of those lower notes that I wouldn't have had access to if I just tuned my bass down to E flat. Like I'm some kind of prey. Now she drags me deeper and draws me in, and I must abide. But yes, I use the TW35, which is my Spectre, and it's tuned to BEAD. It's a 35 scale bass. It's got the EMG pickups, and then I use my, I do everything in the DAW, and this is why I really want to show this on your channel, because I know that it's a very gear-oriented channel, and I think that's awesome. But I also want people to know that there are options out there if they're like don't have a lot of space, or they don't have the ability to even have sound. Maybe they're in a really small apartment, and they can do all this stuff in their headphones in a DAW, you know what I mean? And so in the software, they can use Amplitude, which is IK Multimedia. There's a lot of other great ones too, which we're gonna be doing some videos on. And so I used, again, Amplitude, and then I just used, you'll show some pictures of the built-in pedals that I used on that plugin, and then like I said, I try to use my amp that I use when I'm live. It's the SVT4, and so they have this SVX, which is part of the plugin, but you guys will see that on the screen when he overdubs the pictures. And then I pulled in this little melodic thing that like kind of reminds me of what we did on the last one. There was just this spot where I could do something really melodic and cool, and I was like, I want to cast a spell with my bass, right? So that's like the riff. I wanted that to sound like that. The first time though, I just kind of hinted at it, and then the second time I put all the effects on it, so it like really cast a spell, because the lyrics start talking about this vixen, right? This vixen that comes in and and then eventually like the guy's in this prison that he cannot escape, right?
Into this prison, there's not a chance to escape. You must free yourself, and only time can set you free.
And so, so I cast a spell with my bass, and then the chorus though already sort of had the riff kind of in place, so I just wanted to sort of go with that and just I added a couple rhythmic things that I kept hearing, so I was like, I'm just gonna do it.
Still I burn. Ring of light for the rising tide, for the eclipse tonight. Burn. Still I burn. Flashing light for the raging tide, for the eclipse tonight.
So since this is a video, I did a dance break. But this is where I would envision that I would be hyping the crowd. So sometimes there's a part of a song where I can just be hyping the crowd. I can not play bass. I can get them crazy, get them involved, dancing, and invested in the last portion of the song that we're about to go through. And there's usually screaming involved by me, and that's the dance break.
So the very first thing that came to my mind when I first heard this song was, wow, this sounds like it could be a Velvet Revolver or Guns N' Roses song, which then I just kind of had that in my brain, I think, the whole time when I was recording it, because all I could think of was, what would Duff McKagan do for this bass line? And that's kind of funny to me because I'm not a big Velvet Revolver or Guns N' Roses fan. I kind of just know the hits and that's it. But I'm a really big fan of Duff McKagan's bass lines and just really how he forms his songs and his bass lines around the song too. And so I think I had that in my mind the whole time I was recording this and really looking for the kind of tone I was going for. And that was more of a vintage throaty sound that would get just a really thick, nice settle in the mix. And I think I did pretty good on it. I know Duff McKagan pretty much only uses PJ basses, and I don't have a really good PJ bass. So I thought to myself, what would the closest thing I could maybe do with that? And I thought that my number one bass, my green Fender Made in Mexico jazz bass that's been modded quite a bit, would do the job, and I really think it did. Basically, it has Seymour Duncan SJB3 pickups in it, and I took down the volume on the bridge pickup by about 25-30% or so, and really just had that nice, more throaty sound, basically because that neck pickup is the star of the show. And lately, I've been playing around a lot with the Boss GT1000, where you can just have so many different sounds, so many things going on, and just it sounds fantastic no matter what I found. And I decided I was gonna go ahead and make that tone from scratch, or try and make that tone from scratch that was in my head. So basically, I was gonna have a 2 amp setup, start with a compression pedal right at the beginning, and then have it split with those 2 different sounds just to see how it would go. So for the first chain, we have a natural bass sound, that just a nice, very clean sound, but I went ahead and threw a distortion in front of it, and this is the bass driver, so basically think like your Sans amp sound. And then for the second one, I had a driven, more Ampeg-like bass sound. And overall for the tone, I'm really happy with what I was able to get out of this, and I feel that it's just such a nice bass tone that is not too crazy out there, but it's not just bone dry either. And then for writing the parts, again, I just had Duff in mind. And so I thought the best would just to kind of be, make sure you have that rhythm down, make sure you're going with that low end and fill in that song. So really, I just try to stay with the guitar quite a bit, which is opposite of normally what I try to do, but the song is the show. So there's no reason for me to go out there and go crazy with all these licks and fills and whatnot. So I decided really to stick with the guitar, but just add that nice, deep, throaty low into it. And it's just, again, it kind of sounds like a Velvet Revolver song to me. And really, I hope I made Duff proud.
the first part of the challenge for me was just like getting my ego out of the way of like, people are going to be hearing Jayme Lewis play to this track, and then they're going to hear me play to this track. And in my head, it's like you're watching some stand-up who has only done stand-up twice, and then Chris Rock comes on stage. And you're like, yeah, I'm so happy I'm compared to this person. So like trying not to think about that, because if you spend too much time thinking about music like a competition, then you ruin everything and it's not fun anymore. Just like the last time I used my Fender Getty, because it's my number one, and because I've got the BEAD Thunderbird, which everybody should read about on the YouTube channel or on the basschannel.net. But I didn't feel like this song lent itself to being tuned down quite that low, so instead I just went down a half step on the Getty on all the strings, and that seemed to work just fine for me. And then I went into the Pork and Pickle by Way Huge. These are the settings that I was using even. I spent a lot of time playing around with this. I know that it's probably bass blasphemy, but I like this better than the dark glass pedals. Mostly because it's a little easier to control. The knobs it's a little simpler as far as I'm concerned, and it's easier to not get an overwhelming sound, because one of the things I really like about bass tone is when it's more bass and less fuzz, less distortion. So I use the overdrive on the Pork and Pickle, and then you can see that the drive is like fairly low. It's in the first quarter of the scale, because you go too far and it gets to be too much. And I really like being able to dial in the clean blend and the clean tone with this pedal too. So it was nice to get a little bit of grunt, but not an overwhelming amount of sound. And I also felt like that matched to the song pretty well, because the song is not this like song. It's really it's pretty cool sounding for a metal song. You know what I mean?
In the morning hour, I fall asleep and I start to stray. As I start to find out what it means to stay away.
So kind of with the whole song overall, my overall theme thing first was, and I really had to get out of my own way, because like I was saying, part of it was the ego thing. Like, oh God, I'm competing against blah, blah, blah. You're not competing. Music's not a competition. But so like, had to get that out of my head first. And then I came into the song like wanting to make it sound a certain way, which turned out to be a problem, right? Because I came in and I'm like trying to play along, and I'm playing a whole bunch of notes, and I'm trying to play really fast, and it's not sounding right. So I'm doing it again, and it's still not sounding. And I banged my head against that wall like 7 times. I want this to sound like this. I want to play like this during this song. And it couldn't make it sound good at all. And I got really, really frustrated. So then I did a crazy thing. I put the bass down and I just listened to the song. I know it's crazy idea. And I just listened to the song like 3 times in a row, because I don't have any ideas. I don't know what I'm doing with this song. It's not working. So I settled in and just tried to listen to everything that was going on to the song to find something that I could grab onto. And what I finally latched onto was, I really liked the drum rhythm. I thought the drums were doing a really interesting thing the whole time. And I was like, well, then what I'm going to try to do, and let's see if this works, is I'm going to focus on the drums and kind of try to mirror the drums. I'm not going to play exactly every hit that the drummer is playing, but I want to kind of, echo's not the right word, probably mirror is the best word. What is going, can you hear my kids behind me? Can you stop, please? Thank you.
Still I burn, flashing light for the raging
So I decided I wanted to kind of mirror what the drums are doing. So I was listening for what the toms are doing and what the snare's doing and what the kick is doing and trying to lock into that basic rhythm instead. And once I started doing that, it really felt like it was working better for me. And it became very sparse. Like my part, when you listen to my part, you'll notice there's not a whole lot of notes. There's not a whole lot going on. And it's simple, but I kind of liked it. I felt like it supported the song better by not making the bass be like the thing that everybody's hearing, but rather just the support in the song. And part of that comes from like, I just learned a song by Guar, and the song by Guar has like 4 notes in the whole song, but it's great. It's really simple. I think you use the term shoveling eights, but it's like 4 notes in the whole song. And then I learned a Clash song. I learned Know Your Rights. Clash songs have great bass lines, but it's a really simple bass line. There's not a whole lot going on, but it kind of carries the song. And I was like, well, I can do that. Let's see what I can do about that and kind of make it groove more. So that was what I went for. And so you can hear, hopefully, that the bass and the drums are kind of really not necessarily exactly locked in, but I'm trying to support what the drums are doing to let everything else happen.
As I watch the show around my mind with my thoughts to blame into this prison, there's not a chance to escape.
And it's funny because I still had a hard time like remembering the song or remembering how everything went. And I was texting a friend of mine like, I know what I want to do, but I can't play it right. I don't know what I'm doing. And I texted her, I know that if I was learning this song from somebody else and I had their tab in front of me, I'd be able to play it right away. And then you do one of those things like where as you're saying a thing, your brain is like, hey, dummy. She's like, oh, if I had the tab in front of me, I could play this. Wait, if I had the tab, oh, I should probably tab this out, and that would make it easier for me to play. So then I went and printed out some tab and like I just wrote the song out for myself with my own little notations for timing and stuff. And then that's what I followed while I was playing it, and it made it like 100 times easier. I listened a bunch of times and I really tried to find the key center, and as far as I could tell, it was an A minor flat. And like I listened to it, my music teacher friend listened to it, I got an app and listened to it, and that's the one I kept landing on. I was like, I think it might be an E flat, but everything else is saying it's an A flat. It sounds right in A flat. So my note choices there were not to just sit on the 5 on the E string, not to just sit on that A flat. So I went A flat, open E, and then I think I went to the G, and just kind of did that cycle. And it didn't feel that outside for me because all of that works within the key. And it made it just a little bit, it gave it a little bit of flavor without being overwhelming.